The drums roll and the trumpets blare. It's the day of days in South Carolina for the running of the Darlington Southern 500, one of the premier stock car races in the country. 48 stock production cars await the starter's flag. All are assembly line models, not altered or souped up mechanically. They'll take more punishment today on these 500 miles than the average driver gives his car in a year. The surviving cars will average better than 100 miles per hour. Fireball Roberts is starting on the pole today, followed by Buck Baker, Jim Pascal, Joe Weatherly, and Bobby Jones. Cotton Owens had the sixth best qualifying time with Rex White, Richard Petty, 1959's Grand National champion Lee Petty, and Junior Johnson rounding out the top 10 starters. They jockey for early position, and some push their cars too hard. Junior Johnson has blown his engine before 17 laps are completed. Another casualty, Elmo Langley lost control on the 25th lap, seriously injuring car builder Spook Crawford. 11 cars are welded together on the lead lap. Young Richard Petty in car number 43 and teammate Jim Pascal in car 44 are the ones to watch as they duel with Fireball Roberts in car 22. Two blue streaks of lightning as they thunder around the track. 80,000 spectators react as one when Reb Wickersham spins wildly and breaks an axle. Already an accident on the 95th lap left 3 men dead and several injured when Bobby John slammed into the unprotected pit area. As the race nears the halfway mark, 18 cars have already been forced out of the competition. Buck Baker pulls in for a tire change, as does rookie David Pearson. Many a race is won in the pits where every second counts. There's not a moment wasted as the crews swarm all over the cars like ants, some changing tires as others check the gas and oil. Almost before you could say, fill her up, Buck Baker is on his way. Meanwhile, Richard Petty has grabbed the lead on the 156th lap. The incredible pace continues to take its toll as Fred Lorenzen blows an engine. On lap 188, Lee Petty rams into the guardrail and cuts a tire. But the veteran driver coolly brings his Plymouth down safely. Coming out of the pits a little too early, Ned Jarrett takes his gas can out onto the track. On lap 224, Richard Petty regains the lead from Buck Baker. This sure has been a big year for Richard. He's finally won his first 2 NASCAR Grand National races, and his wife recently gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. Wonder if he'll follow in the footsteps of Grandpa Lee and Daddy Richard. The duel is now between Richard Petty, Buck Baker, and Fireball Roberts as they joust for the lead with 30 laps to go. There's Rex White and his Piedmont Chevy hanging on close to the leaders. Coming out of the 4th turn, Tiny Lund in car 45 explodes into the grandstand wall. The caution light holds the drivers as the crippled car, now a piece of junk, is towed from the track. With 20 laps to go, the green comes out and they scream into high again. Suddenly, Fireball Roberts is in trouble. A broken axle finishes the popular driver for the day. The race is now between Richard Petty and Buck Baker. But with just 3 laps remaining, Petty pops a tire, taking him out of the hunt. Baker is now completely in control. Rex White is second. Wait, Buck Baker blows a tire and has to fight to bring his Pontiac into the pits. However, Baker's crew gesture and scream, "No, no, keep going, keep going!" Rex White takes the checkered flag as Buck Baker drags his wounded car past the finish line. But wait, there's a call from the finish line. Hold everything! A recheck of the scorecard shows that Rex White was credited with 1 lap too many. Buck Baker is declared the winner in one of stock car racing's greatest finishes.
Welcome to Popular Mechanics' exciting look at some of the greatest finishes in stock car history. I'm Parker Johnstone, and today we're at one of NASCAR's newest venues, the Banquet Frozen Foods 300 at Sears Point International Raceway in Sonoma, California. We'll be joined by several of NASCAR's top drivers, as well as examining some of the most unique, thrilling, and dangerous finishes in stock car history. Joining us later in the program will be the king, Richard Petty.
Richard is NASCAR Winston Cup's winningest driver with 200 victories and 7 championships. We'll also talk with Darrell Waltrip, 3-time Winston Cup champion and winner of the 1989 Most Popular Driver Award. The hard-charging Dale Earnhardt, winner of 3 Winston Cup championships and motorsport's top all-time money winner. NASCAR's leading road racer and 1989 Winston Cup champion, Rusty Wallace. The very popular Skoal Bandit, Harry Gant. Terry Labonte, winner of 10 Winston Cup races and 1984's NMPA Driver of the Year award. Kyle Petty, the charismatic competitor with over $2.5 million in career winnings. 1985 Rookie of the Year, Ken Schrader. And Dick Beatty, NASCAR's Winston Cup director.
Stock car racing has become big business and a major sports attraction. Because of the types of cars involved and the rules governing them, stock car racing is considered by many to be the most exciting and competitive of all motorsports. Practically every Winston Cup race ends in dramatic fashion, with door handle to door handle, fender banging action right from the start. Over 3 million fans come out to watch the races every year, with another 200 million joining along at home on TV. How did stock car racing begin? Let's go to Greg Fielden, author of the most comprehensive and complete books ever written about stock car racing, the 4-volume series, 40 Years of Stock Car Racing. Greg is standing by at Michigan International Speedway in Brooklyn, Michigan.
Thank you, Parker, from sunny California. We're here, as you see, in the misty, rainy Michigan International Speedway. Stock car racing history, pretty fabulous sport. Been around about 45 years. Kind of got started as a gathering of unorganized gladiators. Spent the days running moonshine, and spent nights running around in dusty circles throughout the Southland.
And then, a likable Virginian named William France came in and introduced some revolutionary changes to the sport. General rules, guaranteed prize money, and a point fund. At a December 1947 meeting in Daytona, Florida, 35 men sitting around a table in a smoke-filled room laid the groundwork for a national sanctioning body. NASCAR, the National Association for Stock Car Racing, was founded, and Big Bill France was elected president. It wasn't long before NASCAR attracted the finest drivers in the country. The first year, 1949, NASCAR sponsored only 8 races, but the public liked what they saw, and by 1951, NASCAR hosted 41 Grand National events, including 6 on the West Coast. In those years, as many as 82 drivers were entered in a race, with the last row starting a half lap behind the leaders. The cars were as diverse as the personalities of the drivers. On a typical race day, you could see Studebakers, Packards, Hudsons, and Kaisers racing alongside Fords, Olds, and Plymouths. Occasionally, a Cadillac, Volkswagen, Lincoln, and even Jaguar would qualify. By 1972, the NASCAR Grand Nationals became a premier event of about 30 races annually. The drivers, crews, and machines are all the cream of the crop. Virtually every team is a winner.
That's a brief look at the history of NASCAR racing and how it got to where it is today and the slick production you're about to see. Let's go racing.
The one driver who has participated in more great finishes than any other would, of course, be the man who has won more Winston Cup races than any other. We asked Richard Petty which were his most memorable finishes. Richard, I've talked to a lot of drivers, and one race that just keeps coming up is that 1976 Daytona 500, where you and David Pearson battled all the way to the finish. Could you tell us a little bit about that race?
Well, I went second. I can remember that part of it. It was just one of the typical Daytona races. It came down to the last lap situation.
Midwesterner Ramo Stott sits on the pole. Benny Parsons won last year. But on a collision course with Petty is David Pearson, another veteran, who has never won this 500-mile classic, which offers $350,000 in gold, plus the adulation of millions of racing fans all across the nation, all around the world. The green flag waves all 42 cars off in a pandemonium of noise and dust and flashing color. An all-time record crowd of 125,000 has swelled the Daytona Speed Week's audience to another record throng of almost 500,000 people. The strong contenders move up fast in the field. Stott is overwhelmed by Petty's flame red and bright blue STP Dodge. Buddy Baker, the quiet giant, who was Petty's teammate in 1972, takes the lead in early racing with Petty's STP car in hot pursuit. A blown engine signals trouble and possible tragedy. That's Salt Walther, the famous Indy driver, spinning on the oily track to bring on an early yellow caution flag. Now the STP driver and his former teammate Buddy Baker are at it again. Hammer and tongs, bumper to bumper. Suddenly, Baker is out, a failed engine. With 57 laps yet to run, the terminal drama takes shape. Now a revival of the classic stock car feud between Petty and Pearson. David Pearson, also due for a fuel stop, stays out a little longer to stretch his advantage. But now he too must pit for fuel and tires. But clockers believe Petty must make a final stop for fuel because he pitted too early. Now, on lap 171, comes the big break for Petty. Terry Bivens spins. The yellow light blinks a warning, and Petty roars into his pit for a final precious gulp of fuel and some fresh rubber. Pearson follows suit. Petty gets rolling again. And Pearson is on his way to the final sprint for golden glory in the Daytona 500. Pearson maintains a slender lead. Now Petty shows he has the power to overtake.
I was leading the race and got the white flag and going up the backstretch, and David passed me going into number 3 corner, and I was able to cut and get back down on the inside of him, and we come through 3 and 4 corners side by side, and coming off with the number 4 corner, got a little bit too close.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? He's still moving. The car stops 300, 400 feet shy of the finish line. Pearson is still running. Here's Petty trying to fire to come across the line. David Pearson moving down through as they come to the stripe. The winner is car number 21. It's going to be, I believe, Pearson's victory. You'll just have to wait and see. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished in the front end, as well as car number 21.
It hit and we spun, and I thought the car was going to spin across the start-finish line backwards. I said, man, it's going to be something to win this race backwards, but liked about 20 yards short and didn't quite make it. And David got his cranked up and got the start-finish line first, so we run second.
I almost hate to bring this up, but could you tell us a little bit about your run-ins with Bobby Allison, in particular the 1972 race at Wilkesboro?
Well, you know, there was just a lot of confirmation there. I don't really remember that much about who was leading and who wasn't leading, and I hit him and he hit me, and, you know, one of these kind of deals. In the last lap of the race, I don't think either one of us could turn the car. I think we just going down and bounced off the wall and got it going the other direction, and made it back to start-finish line. We wound up winning the race somehow. If it had been another lap, neither one of the cars would have probably made the deal. We'd run into each other like a whole bunch of times, I guess, but the last couple of laps there, it got so bad that we was running on flat tires and bent wheels and everything else. And anyhow, like I say, I made it back to the start-finish line and won the race, but that was just a continuation. That wasn't just one race deal. The week before, he and I had some more confirmation at Wilkesboro, at Martinsville, and I wound up winning the race up there. And that wasn't the only one. It went back probably for a year and a half, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I guess Wilkesboro was probably the most deliberate looking from his point and my point as far as knocking each other around. But made it exciting for the fans, made it pretty exciting for the drivers.
Darrell, in your mind, what are the elements that make up a great finish? Something that you remember long after the race is over?
Surprise, something different, some kind of strategy maybe that's a little different than anybody had used before. But the element of surprise, that's what I've always tried to do, was not let a guy really know what I had up my sleeve. You know, if he thought maybe you'd work him on the high side a little while and he thinks you're going to pass him on the outside and then dive low on the last lap, or maybe pass him coming down 2 laps to go rather than on the last lap. Things that, well, you figure a guy out, you know, you figure, well, he thinks I'm going to do X, and you do the opposite, and that works pretty well sometimes.
The Mason-Dixon 500 at Dover Downs in 1983. What are your reflections on that race?
Well, Bobby Allison and I in 81, 82, and 83 staged some tremendous duels. We won the championship over Bobby in 81 and 82. You know, he had to win a championship in '83 because we couldn't have another year like we'd had '81 and '82. But Dover was one of those races. He and I had swapped the lead all day long. I led a lot. He led a lot.
It's strictly a two-car race between Darrell Waltrip in car 11 and Bobby Allison driving number 22. Between the two of them, they've led for 414 of the 500 miles here at Dover. But now the race is between Waltrip, Allison, and the weather.
We got a caution late, and we had a shootout.
Whoa, looks like there's a tremendous lightning storm approaching the track. It could start raining any moment now.
We come off the fourth turn, and Bobby had been holding the inside because at Dover, that's the best place to be. So I made up my mind on the last lap again, trying to use the element of surprise, that if I could get down into turn 3 a little harder than he did and get up on the outside of him, I may just have a chance to win the thing. So we went into 3, and Bobby went low like he had all day, and I just held mine as hard as I could and got up on the outside, and we come across the start-finish line, again, just inches apart. The good thing about that again was, and I loved racing with Bobby and Richard and Cale and David, we came off of turn 4. I mean, all Bobby had to do is give me a little shot in the door. I'm into the wall, and he wins the race, no, without any contest. But it didn't happen that way. We came across side by side, inches apart, and he won and I run second, but it was still an exciting race.
It's a tremendous lightning storm going on, approaching the track, and rain started to fall, and Bobby Allison beat Darrell Waltrip by a half car length back to the yellow flag. Tragic affair. That storm did hit the track, and 2 spectators died.
Let's talk about the Rebel 500 at Darlington.
I think that's probably, in my opinion, if you watch races through the years, one of the best races I've ever been in. Richard Petty and I just staged a tremendous duel. It was just exciting. It was exciting to be in.
We're into the last lap of the Rebel 500 with the 3 leaders jammed together.
Darrell Waltrip and Richard Petty, they got the white flag, and I think they changed lead 6 or 8 times on the last lap. It's very unusual at Darlington. It's a one-groove track, and each one would pass the other one and drive in too deep, and the other would pass him back. He would drive in too deep.
Darrell Waltrip goes high on turn 1. Richard Petty looks to the inside. They're neck and neck. It's a drag race to the finish line. Bobby Allison is blocked in 3rd place with nowhere to go.
We passed each other 5 times on the last lap at Darlington. And Darlington's a racetrack where you can only make 1 pass per lap.
Down the backstretch, the final 2 turns. Richard Petty can't hold his car low. Here comes Darrell Waltrip underneath.
We must have passed each other at least twice a lap. And when it wound down, he made the last pass.
Waltrip passes Petty for the lead. After 367 laps, this has come down to a 100-yard dash. Allison tries the inside, but Waltrip wins the Rebel 500.
On a one-groove racetrack where only 1 pass is possible per lap, how do you account for 5 passes on the last lap?
Well, we both wanted to win.
Dale, there are a couple of races that might stand out in your mind as some of the great finishes in NASCAR history, particularly the Talladega 500 in 1984. Do you have any reflections on that race? What stands out in your mind?
Well, I do. It was one of the most competitive races I was ever in. There's so many cars that could have won the race.
We have 10 cars running together, and it's not lap 20. It's not halfway. It's the final mile. 10 cars racing for the finish. This is unheard of. We've never seen anything like this before.
It was pretty exciting because we raced all day long. It was just every lap you made, it was just like you was trying to fight the whole crowd off.
Terry Labonte takes the lead going into the white flag. Dale Earnhardt is tucked closely behind.
Well, it's great to have the car and you know, have everything working and you feel so good about running, but it's great to be that way and have a good competitive race going on. The Talladega race in '84 was that way. Everybody was right there together and racing together, and it was like, you know, anybody could win.
Down the backstretch now, Earnhardt breaks out of the draft and shoots ahead of Labonte. Earnhardt is going to win the 1984 Talladega 500 going away.
Dale Earnhardt is kind of like pulling somebody out of the 50s and throwing them into the 80s and 90s. He's a seat-of-the-pants driver. He earned his top ride not by a fat wallet, but by a heavy right foot and a lot of talent. And little wide elbows at times, too. But he's a throwback, and he's a legend in his own time.
And it's Earnhardt, Baker, Labonte, and Allison at the checkered flag.
So that was one of the greatest races I ever won and greatest finishes I've ever been involved in.
Harry Gant's going to explain a little bit about what makes a NASCAR Grand National car different from what you find on the road.
Well, this particular car here, the number 33 Skull Bandit, is a Oldsmobile Cutlass. And as you see, the body is the only thing, the sheet metal is the only thing that really resembles those that you would go to the showroom and buy, because it's rear wheel, all the cars are rear wheel drive. You know, we have a GM motor here. Most of all the GM cars, Pontiacs and Oldsmobiles and Chevrolet, they can run a Chevrolet, basically a Chevrolet engine in them, 358 cubic inches of max on it. They all have a special transmission for the road course and these new special Alcon brakes they have. Now the chassis are tube-in chassis, which are made by basically 3 manufacturers in North Carolina and there, South Carolina. It's Banjo Matthews, which we prefer. That's what they call the rear steer chassis. And then we have Mike Lofton and Hudson Pagan. Dick Hutchins never builds them there, but both of those other two, they'll go either way, whichever way you want, a front steer or rear steer. But basically, when this tube-in chassis first came out, it was basically a rear steer copy off of the Ford company back in the 60s. And it's worked real good for us, so we tend to sort of stay with that. But the configuration of the body cannot be altered very little, just enough for some tire clearance. We have templates that fit the roof, fit the doors, fit the fenders and everything, and we got to keep these cars resembling a stock car that you would go buy in the showroom. And of course we have the roll cages inside for protection, 1 seat, you know, the fire extinguisher, we have front and rear brake adjustments, rev limiters to shut the engines off in case you over-rev the motor. We're limited to the rear deck spoiler, which that holds the car to the ground. You're very limited to that. Cubic inches and the degrees that we can run. You know, in the big tracks, Daytona and Talladega, they have the restrictor plates now, and they also have a minimum height on the spoiler. I mean, a maximum. You can push it down. The more you push the spoiler down, 10 degree runs faster than 25, but you got to have something to keep the wheels on the ground. We were up to, you know, nearly 200 mile an hour at the last race at Talladega, so the restrictor plates cuts us back to about 440 horsepower. And, you know, years ago, you couldn't run that fast with 600 horsepower, but the new design of the bodies and the aerodynamics they have and the spoilers they work on the rear, the cars now are getting, you know, fast again. They want to cut them back again. NASCAR, which come out with a smaller plate, which will be running in the next race at Talladega. And it cuts about 20 more horsepower out of the engine, so you'll be back down to about 420. And it should keep the speed somewhere around 190, 91 miles an hour, you know, this time of year. So it's incredible that you can make a car go that fast. If you accelerate the car out of the pit road, it feels practically like a street car, you know, when you're used to 650 horsepower and you only got 420, there's a world of difference. But the shapes of the cars and the wind tunnel tests that the manufacturers give us now, it makes the cars have less drag.
That's a look into the world of not-so-stock Grand National stock cars with the Bandit, Harry Gant. Rusty, tell us about some of the greatest finishes that you've been involved with, because they're numerous and your name comes up often in conversations.
I've had a bunch of them, believe me.
After a 24-hour rain delay, it looks like the 1987 Budweiser at the Glen Watkins Glen race is about to begin. Terry Labonte is the pole sitter, followed by Rusty Wallace, Jeff Bodine, Tim Richmond, and Morgan Shepherd in the number 5 spot.
I led the race throughout the day.
Your follow to the inside of her car. She's going to go chasing the lead.
On lap 63, Rusty Wallace takes the lead again from defending 1986 Watkins Glen winner Tim Richmond.
The crew chief came across the radio and told me, say, start watching your fuel pressure gauge because I don't think we're going to make it on fuel. And I'm going, there's no way. I mean, I've been leading all day and I've got a pit, I'll lose the race. But I had such a big lead at that point. I came down, entered the last corner to go past start-finish line, and it ran out of fuel. So I had to run down pit road, put fuel in that car, maybe 2 or 3 quarts of fuel at the most, and the engine quit running. It started itself back up somehow. I left, and I still won the race by 6 or 7 seconds, and that's how big a lead I had. That was pretty dramatic, that one.
Terry, tell me a little bit about the 85 Rockingham race.
That was a race that, late in the race, myself and Neil Bonnet and Harry Gant, we raced each other for the last 100 miles or so, I guess, and it seemed like in the last 20 laps, we all three, you know, traded the lead there and passed each other back and forth, and I don't think we ever touched the fender. Not a one of us ever leaned on the other one. You know, it's probably one of the cleanest races that you could see, and I I think Neil just barely edged out Harry there at the finish, and I wound up third, but it's like I was right behind him. There wasn't no place to go. But that was a close race. It just race ended, and I was in the wrong spot.
Unlike that clean professional race there, what about the 87 Martinsville race in contrast?
Well, that was a pretty exciting race, an exciting finish. We had a caution late in the race, and we were running second during the late stages there. We all got stopped and got tires. Earnhardt was leading the race. I was running second. Darrell Waltrip was third.
I had run well all day, but at the end there, we were behind because we made our final pit stop early, and Earnhardt stayed out until the very last minute, and then he pitted with about 20-odd laps to go. Well, that put me back in the same lap with him, and he and Terry and I were only 3 cars on the lead lap. But lo and behold, there's a caution flag with about 10 laps to go. We get closed up, get 4 new tires on the car, and we're going to go racing.
The green flag is back out, and there's just 3 laps to go. Earnhardt, Labonte, and Waltrip are literally bumper to bumper to bumper as they come out of turn 2. Down the backstretch, Labonte and Waltrip are looking for any opportunity. On turn 4, Labonte, frustrated, is punching his car into Earnhardt. Waltrip looks high, but nothing doing. Earnhardt continues to lead the way with 2 laps remaining. Waltrip again looks high on the turn, but there's no room. On the backstretch, Labonte fakes inside, but Earnhardt drops down to block him.
Dale was leading, Terry was second, I was third, and we come down on the last lap. And Terry tried to get by Dale on the outside, and Dale pinched Terry up in the wall. And they got a little sideways. When they did, I was coming off 2. I got down underneath Terry going into 3. Terry was mad at Dale. I'm convinced this is the way it was. Terry was going to go down and give Dale a little tap because Dale tried to put him in the wall. He went in the turn about a mile over his head. I was underneath him. I bumped him. He hit Dale. They went up the racetrack, and I come off the corner and won the race.
Coming down the back straightaway for the last on the last lap, I was trying to pass Earnhardt, and Waltrip ran in the back of me so hard he knocked me into Earnhardt and knocked us both out, and he won the race. It was a good race for him, I guess. Dale and I didn't think it was too good.
That wasn't a good race.
Now let's go to Greg Fielden for a look at some of the great vintage NASCAR finishes.
Well, Daytona International Speedway took about 5 years for the track to materialize. Started laying groundwork in 1954, had a lot of red tape, finally got it constructed in 59. It was a speedway of impressive dimensions, something the drivers have never ever tackled before. Prior to the race, a lot of the drivers were asked their opinion of what's this going to be like. Fireball Roberts says, well, this is the track you can floorboard it all the way, don't have to let up. Buck Baker said it's the Hollywood of racing. Dave Evans of Goodyear Tires said it should be as safe as well as fast. Marvin Pants says, well, I've decided to retire, but not now, not till I test this track.
The formalities are over for good, and 3 score men and machines throw the throttle wide open in quest of the richest prize in stock car history, $62,660, with nearly $23,000 awaiting the victor.
59 drivers started the first Daytona 500. They're racing 2, 3, 4 abreast, something no one had ever seen before.
Full winner Wellborn qualified for this one at 140-plus miles per hour. But it's Fireball Roberts in his number 3 Pontiac who latches on to the early lead. Jack Smith in his 1959 Chevrolet Impala is closing the gap on the leaders. But Roberts blisters the pavement at an average lap speed of 147 miles per hour to hold on to the lead. Believe it or not, he got his nickname Fireball for his baseball pitching prowess. Round and round they go. 200 laps of flirting with engine-killing speeds and buffeting winds at a speed of 2.5 miles every 64 seconds. But Roberts' pace proves to be too much, and the likable Daytona Beach entry enters the pits for the duration. Tom Pistone takes over, but it's a little too warm under the hood of his 59 Thunderbird, and the pit stop sets him back a lap. Jack Smith in number 47 now holds the lead as the grueling pace shows its effect on tires, engines, and drivers. The Atlanta lead-foot can't hold on either, and Johnny Beauchamp, the number 73, threads his Thunderbird into the lead. L.D. Austin has a little hood trouble, but nobody's going to stop and give him a hand this time. Number 42, Lee Petty, squeezes ahead of Beauchamp, but Johnny gets a free ride in the slipstream, bumper to bumper at 140 miles per hour.
There was no photo finish equipment, 500 miles of racing. No one ever figured it'd be close. Well, they ran the full 500 miles, caution-free.
Starting the last lap, Beauchamp pulls up into piggyback position, and it may be one of the greatest finishes in history.
They crossed the line side by side by side. There were 3 cars. 2 of them were principals, Johnny Beauchamp, Lee Petty, and Joe Weather was kind of in the way at the end.
But the track judges are fooled temporarily, and Johnny Beauchamp is declared the unofficial winner. Beauchamp receives all the niceties of the winner's office, including this smack from Speedway Queen Scotty McCormick. Newsreel pictures of the finish, however, prove Lee Petty the winner several days later. Oh, well, says Johnny, it was a heck of a lot of fun while it lasted.
Lee Petty won by a bumper bolt. 1969 Motor State 500 here at Michigan. This is the first time the stock cars came up here. It kind of wowed all the people up here. They'd never seen 2 or 3 or 4 abreast racing. TV wasn't a big medium back in those days. The cars were dicing back and forth like no one ever seen up here before. No one used their seats. Grandstand fights just like in the South.
Suddenly down the front chute, it's Leroy Yarborough in that red-hot Cyclone. He finds a hole on the low side and takes the lead. Leroy may have the lead, but Cale Yarborough in car number 21 has moved into second place and is knocking on the door. Uh-oh, car number 18 just dropped a drive line right down the main straightaway. This brings out another yellow flag, and the pits go wild with action. When the green light blinks again, Paul Goldsmith is the boy to catch in the red Dodge number 99. This new track is fast and wide, and just to prove it, Cale Yarborough tries the low side of a threesome down the back chute and takes the lead away. And now Pearson wants to play. He pulls a beautiful slingshot off the second turn to pass Cale and Leroy and grab the number 1 spot. With about 25 laps to go, the Wood brothers give Cale a sign to pit. They figure this will be his last stop of the day, and that all the other leaders will pit. Back on the track, the leaders are number 17, Pearson, 21, Cale Yarborough, 43, Richard Petty, and 98, Leroy Yarborough. Down the front chute, Cale Yarborough hangs it all out, pushing that big Cyclone around the outside of Pearson to grab the second spot. Now he's in hot pursuit of Leroy.
Last lap, Cale Yarborough and Leroy Yarborough driving Team Mercury's. Well, they tangled going over there in 1 and 2, and Leroy went into the wall. Cale fishtailed down the backstretch and wound up winning. Interestingly, Leroy, who was on a very big winning streak that year, drove his car the rest of the way around the track, grinding the car against the outside wall. Finally came to halt just short of the finish line. He got 4th, Cale got the win.
With all the competition behind him, Cale Yarborough scorches his number 21 through the 4th turn for the last time and under the checkered flag. The winner of the Motor State 500.
Kyle, can you describe to us some of the greatest finishes that you remember coming from a long line of famous race car drivers?
I don't know, there's probably too many to describe, really. One's, I guess mine, when I won my first race at Richmond, was a big win for us, and that was a big finish because I was running 4th or 5th with 5 or 6 laps to go, and Dale Earnhardt and I think Darrell Waltrip and Jeff Bodine and Joe Ruttman were in front of me, and Dale and Darrell got together going in 3, and it must have took out 10 or 12 cars and took out 1st through 4th, and I ended up making it through the wreck, slowing down to 2nd gear and making it through the wreck and winning the race. So that was a big finish.
During your first win, what was going through your mind as you saw the wreckage occurring in front of you? I mean, did you know that you might come out of that and win the race at that point?
No, not really, because the wreck started going into 3 with Darrell and Dale. They got together, and then the 2 or 3 cars behind them, Jeff was involved in it. I could see Jeff, but the car in front of me, Joe Ruttman, I never saw him. I didn't see him in the wreck at that time. And you know, after we got through the wreck, you know, I just figured we'd finish second, which was I was tickled to death to finish second because it's been a long time since I'd finished in the top 5. So it was you know, we were pretty happy. We talked on the radio for about a lap while we were riding around. Trying to figure out where we had finished, and then when the pace car came out and picked us up, then we knew we were leading the race. And so that, you know, that I don't think that really sunk in for a couple of days, because that's one of those deals for 4 or 5 laps into the race, where to go in the race you pretty much resigned yourself to finishing 4th or 5th, and then all of a sudden you come out on top. Finishes that I've seen and stuff, I think the greatest finish I've ever seen was a couple of them that my father was involved in was the 84, I think, Firecracker 400, when he beat Cale back to the line under caution, and they were beating on each other coming out of turn 4 down to the line, and that was his 200th win.
It's a big day in Daytona as 80,001 spectators have filled the stands to watch the 1984 Firecracker 400. The one spectator is President Ronald Reagan, on hand for this classic July 4th confrontation. This year's Daytona 500 winner, Cale Yarborough, is on the pole.
Well, that was one of those fantastic finishes, too. Cale and myself had went off and left the field, and you know, I think I wound up leading the race, and you know, he was waiting for the last lap to make a draft by me, and he did the same thing as David Pearson did in 77, 76. We went down the back stretch. Cale pulls out, beats me into the 3rd corner. I do the same thing as I did in 76. I make a left-hand turn, get back beside of him, but this time I didn't really hit him hard enough, or he didn't hit me hard enough that it made anything. We come on off the corner side by side, come down the front stretch side by side, and just as we started into the dog leg, I really had the shorter groove because I was on the inside, and we hit a couple of times, and I beat him to the start-finish line probably by 3 foot at the very most. So I think if you just run side by side and they kept going straight, the cars would have been the same speed, but when we turned left, I sort of had a shorter cut on him, and it was just enough to win the race. And you know, that was pretty exciting from just winning the race. Another deal that was exciting, that it was the 200th one we won. Another exciting deal was that the President of the United States was there. It's the first race that we've ever had a sitting president to attend. So you know, all of it built up to like a storybook situation. If we'd have done that, put it in the movies, everybody got up and walked out, they wouldn't have believed it. That's how fantastic it was.
Tell us about the most memorable finishes that you have, races that stand out in your mind that you'll think about until the end of your racing career.
Well, I guess one of them that really would stick out would be the Firecracker 400 at Daytona in 1987. We were leading the thing with 2 laps to go, and there was a group of about 7 or 8 of us, and we had a right front tire going down. We knew it was going down, but didn't want to come in. Thought, you know, maybe it'd stay up long enough.
Bobby Allison has moved past Ken Schrader and takes the white flag for the final lap.
To make a long story short, we took the white flag, thought we were leading, NASCAR thought we were leading, but Bobby Allison had just passed us. We thought he was getting back on the lead lap, but he actually had taken the lead.
On turn 3, Allison is pulling away from Schrader. He looks impossible to catch. It's Allison by 3 car lengths. Buddy Baker is moving up on Schrader's outside to challenge him for second. Schrader goes low, looking for speed, but Baker moves easily ahead.
And our tire let go coming off turn 4, and we wound up upside down on top of Harry Gant's hood at 200 miles an hour, but we still crossed the finish line 7th place, just upside down.
Why is attending a stock car race so popular? Because it's great fun. Let's take a look at a typical day at the races.
earlier, we talked with Dick Beatty, NASCAR Winston Cup director, who's been around the sport for 40 years. And these were two of the races he remembered the most.
Well, I think the 1976 Petty and David Pearson finish at Daytona was a great one because both of them were in their prime at that time. And the 1981 Talladega, where the rookie outsmarted the two veterans, which was Darrell Waltrip and Terry Labonte, with Ron Bouchard come in and beat both of them by an inch or two.
I think one of the races I think that really stands out would be one at Talladega, and I think that was in 1981. It was a race between Darrell Waltrip and I and Ron Bouchard, and I was trying to pass Darrell for the lead on the last lap, and he kind of blocked me a little bit to the inside. I went to the outside, and I got alongside him, and here comes Ron Bouchard to the inside and passes both of us. You know, it's one of the closest finishes, I guess, that we've ever had.
The last lap, I was in third spot there, and we come down off the corner, and the three of us were in line, and Darrell, he kind of moved for the bottom, and when he did, Terry moved to the outside, and Darrell moved back up in front of him. When he did, I just shot for the bottom and held it to the floor, and I thank God I made it by foot.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the program as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. We'll see you next time with more great racing action.